Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about a recently very big news in the chess world. And our main character is Kateryna Lagno. She is a remarkable figure in the chess world, a really strong grandmaster. Lagno was born in Lviv in western Ukraine back when it was part of the Soviet Union in 1989. She first made a name for herself representing Ukraine in chess. However, in 2014, she switched to the Russian Chess Federation, which caused quite a stir at the time. And currently, she's married to Russian Grandmaster Alexander Grishchuk, and they have 4 children. Now, basically, she is not only a really nice mother, but also a really strong chess player. Lagno was set to participate in the 2025 FIDE Women's Grand Prix in Pune, India, where it is actually a very crucial event in the Women's World Championship cycle, because if you play really well, you can gain points. And at the very end, the higher the points you get, there's points you can get from each tournament, and the higher you get, the better chance you will to have the opportunity to participate in the women's candidates. Now, but she has the chance to participate in the Grand Prix, but she withdrew suddenly, and FIDE stated it was due to personal reasons, but Lagno revealed that the real story, she revealed the real story in an open letter. It all started with the Most Beautiful Game Award at the 2025 Monaco Women's Grand Prix, which has already ended. Lagno believed that her game against Elisabeth Paehtz in the 4th round was one of the best games in her career, and both high quality and spectacular. And indeed, that game was one of the most spectacular game in the whole tournament, and I think it does have a quite high possibility to win the award. But the award instead went to the game between Alexandra Kostyanyuk versus Tan Zhongyi. Lagno was kind of shocked and disappointed because she did play a really well game against Elisabeth Paehtz. She thought Kostyanyuk's game was only spectacular. She played fine, but it was only spectacular because of an unsound sacrifice by Tan Zhongyi with the black pieces, and that Alexandra actually has many chances to win each move, so the game was actually always leaning towards one side. She accused 2 of the jurors, Grandmaster Zurab Asmai-Parashvili and woman Grandmaster Donna Razniz-Ozola, of being politically biased, suggesting that they don't want a Russian player to win the prize. And as you can see here on the screen, Lagno disputes politically biased beauty award withdrawals from Women's Grand Prix. Now, this is a really big news. And after this incident, different people had various reactions. For example, Elisabeth Paehtz, Lagno's opponent in round 4, she lost, and joked that it was her favorite loss, and hinted that there might be some fishy things about this selection, but she didn't think it was related to about nationality or anything. Kostyanyuk, who has won the prize, said that if she had voted, she would definitely chosen Lagno's game, and she denied any political motives in the jury's decision, asking for evidence if there were such serious accusations. Looking at the Grand Prix standings, as here we have, it is also very clear. We can see Lagno in 13th place. It is not Lagno's withdrawal didn't have a huge impact on her chances of qualifying for the 2026 FIDE Women's Candidates tournament, as her ranking wasn't very high and only at 13, so there's basically no chance for her to qualify for the Women's Candidates tournament. But she didn't think it was about she didn't really care about it, and she thought that it was about politically biased or something. And While her ranking wasn't very high, as we can see, still this controversy really shook up the chess community because disputes over the most beautiful game award is something really rare. It doesn't happen a lot. Alright, and that's the whole story of Lagno's withdrawal. There are all kinds of opinions from different players, different fans and everything. And now today, let's take a look at her amazing game of chess. We cannot deny that she really did play an outstanding game against Elisabeth Paehtz. And today, let's take a look at this game, where it was played in the 2025 FIDE Women's Grand Prix in Monaco, where this is round 4, and Kateryna Lagno is playing a really nice tournament so far. She is so far 3 out of 4, and Elisabeth Paehtz is this is round 4, and so far Kateryna is 2 out of 3, yes, and Elisabeth Paehtz is 1.5 out of 3. So in this game, Lagno is with the white pieces, and she starts with d4. We have d5, c4, and e6. This is the queen's gambit declined here. And here, Elisabeth decides to go for h6. Now, definitely this is something that is not considered as the main line. It is not that theory, not that standard, because basically, as we know, most of the times the main lines are knight f6, bishop e7 to develop our pieces, or bishop b4. But here, instead, Elisabeth decides to go for h6. Now, she didn't spend any time on this move, so this is definitely her home preparation. And Lagno here spent about half a minute before deciding to go bishop f4 and developing her bishop normally. We have knight f6 in the game, and here c5 was played. Now, Elisabeth is actually playing really fast so far. Here she played knight h5. Well, actually, before all of these moves, as we can see, let me go back a little bit. Before all of these moves, it was very normal, h6, and this is already getting a little bit weird. Bishop f4, okay, Lagno is still, maybe this is h6 is something that Elisabeth always plays, or this is something that she plays sometimes, a few times, and you can see these games in the opening, in the player's database. And here, Kateryna goes for c5 after thinking for a few minutes, deciding to close up the center and gain more space on the queen side. Now, of course, c5 is the best option here, but if you want to keep everything as it is right now, you can also go for e3 and asking black whether you're going to take on c4 or are you just going to ignore everything. But in the game, Kateryna decides to go for c5 immediately, which is not bad. And here, Elisabeth spent 10 minutes thinking on this next move, which is the best move, and it's knight h5. Now, obviously, a 10-minute thing shows that she is not familiar with this anymore. Maybe c5 surprised her, or maybe h6 is just something that just come up to her mind. Definitely, if h6 is something that she has prepared, then if she didn't prepare c5, then that shows that her preparation is not good enough. But I think that is something that might not happen. Instead, I think this is just something that both players are deciding to play when it comes to the game. Maybe there are no preparations at all or something, just playing what they want to play. And in the game, Lagno decides to go back with the bishop, and here another 17 minutes think e5. Well, actually, e5 is not a very nice move here, too aggressive, and instead, development is much more important right now, and here black should go for something like b6 to fianchetto the bishop this way, and also trying to pressure the pawn structure, in white's pawn structure. And in the game here, black decides to go for e5, which is too aggressive, and here Lagno didn't take, because if you take here, then it will just fall for black's idea of playing d4, not to take back on c5, because here if you take on c5, then there's now e4, and suddenly the queen is attacking this knight, and this knight has nowhere to go. So here, If you take d4 is the best move, and here let's say white goes knight b5 for example, a6, queen a4. This is a variation suggested by the engine because you cannot take because you lose the rook. But if you don't take, then you need to play something like bishop d7 to blockade this diagonal, and then everything is basically kind of forced. Here you go e3 to open up the diagonal for the bishop to defend the knight. It's really tricky, but the position is close to equalization, and it's not that favorable for white. So in the game instead, Lagno decides to go for e3 straight away, and right now attacking the knight on h5, which is kind of misplaced. So here instead of, definitely you cannot go back to f6 because you lose the e5 pawn, and white is attacking the knight, gaining a tempo. And you should note that here black is a little bit behind in development. As you can see, white has developed a knight and a bishop, also has a lot of pawn moves in the opening stage, and a very solid pawn structure, whereas for black, the pieces are still not developed, only this knight, but this is a misplaced knight. And also the pawns are kind of floating in the air, the king is not that safe, and it could be a little bit tricky. And in the game, Elisabeth spent another couple of 10 minutes thinking and played g6. G6, the best move, and here d takes e5 was played. Bishop takes c5, and here queen b3. Now queen b3 might not be the best reply here. Instead, white should just develop with knight f3. But maybe this gives black the chance to go castle, and knight f3 isn't really creating any specific threats. So maybe that is why in the game Lagno decides to go for queen b3. She doesn't want to allow black to castle her king, and she is now attacking this d5 pawn with the knight and the queen. So here, of course, black responds with c6 to defend, and here we have long castle. Long castle just simply shows that Lagno is going in for an attack, because right now, even though the king is on the queen side, but it's not that easy, not fast enough for black to launch an attack, because the pieces are undeveloped and the pawns are not that easy to be pushed. Because if you push b5, basically there's no ongoing idea, so it's no reason to go for that. And for black, if black goes short castle, then white will be the side who is much faster. e4 is coming, attacking the h6 pawn, and also opening up the center. This will be much more favorable towards white's side. So in the game here, Elisabeth decides to go bishop e7 back, but as we can see, she is repeatedly moving her pieces in the opening too many times, and this just even slows down more her development speed, and this is not a good sign. In the game, Lagno decides to keep on developing her pieces with knight f3, and here we have a mistake played by Elisabeth, which is knight a6. Well, of course, her idea is to develop her piece and maybe get this knight to c5, and it is the right direction to develop your pieces, but a6 and then knight c5, knight a6, knight c5 is not the best way for the knight to go to. Instead, the knight should go to d7 because here, if you go knight a6 as played in the game, white can actually just simply take on a6, and after b takes a6, there's queen a4 to attack the pawn and puts a lot of pressure. It's not that easy for black to defend, and let's say if black goes bishop b7, there's now e4 on the board, and here obviously you cannot take because there's all kinds of discovered attacks going on. Bishop e3, the rook is attacking the queen, the knight is going to take the pawn back. Everything is falling apart. So knight a6 is a mistake, and if bishop takes a6 was played in the game, then white will definitely win the game much faster. But in the game, Lagno maybe thought that she didn't want to give up the bishop pair for this bad knight on a6, and instead she decides to go for e6. But this is a really bad move, giving up her chance. I mean, even if she had played something like e4, that will be still fine, but e6, sacrificing a pawn immediately is not worth it right now. Because after e6, basically for black can just take on e6 with the bishop, and now if you take on a6 with bishop takes, and after b takes a6, there's knight d4 for example. These pawns might be a little bit weak, but after bishop d7, black will be just in time to defend the c6 pawn. And now the a6 pawn might just fall after a few moves, but black is right now up a pawn and also has the bishop pair, so the compensation is pretty much like enough, and black is doing really well here. But in the game, well, definitely you cannot take with the f pawn. You cannot take with the f pawn because it damages your own pawn structure. But in the game, Elisabeth went for knight c5, just simply giving this opportunity back immediately, everything back to white. And now white is much better once again. Knight c5. But of course, if you move the queen away, then black will just simply take this e6 pawn. But now white does have an extra option, which is to take on f7, and it is with check, so leaving black with no time to take on b3. And after e takes f7, here Elisabeth played the best move, which is to king f8, ignoring the f7 pawn, because here if you take on f7, then there's queen c2 back. The king is really like wide open up, 95 is coming. It's just not safe enough for the king. Whereas if you go king f8, even though it might look really scary because your opponent's pawn is just on the 7th rank right in front of your king, but sometimes these kinds of pawns, they can become a shelter for your king, and you can actually use your opponent's pawns to blockade, and sometimes it is even harder for your opponent to attack. This f7 pawn blockades all of these diagonals and the files, keeping the king safe right now. And now black is threatening to take the queen, so Lagno decides to drop back with queen c2 and attacking the g6 pawn as well. So here Elisabeth defends it with bishop f5. But here you might just think that, wait a second, this queen has nowhere to go, and I cannot block with the bishop or anything. Am I just losing material? But you just realize that I still have this one move left, which might seem like losing material as well, but it's good enough. And the move is e4. It's kind of forced, but definitely before you play queen c2, you must already calculated all of these lines. Queen c2, bishop f5, and you have this excellent response, e4. But you must see the follow-up, and this is the most beautiful part of this game. In the game, there are basically two options for black to take this pawn. Taking with the bishop is not considered as an option because after takes, and here, let's say bishop e3. Taking with the bishop just doesn't seem right. First of all, you lose the bishop pair, and right now, under all kinds of pins, let's just not consider bishop takes as one of the best, as one of the options. Let's just choose between knight takes and pawn takes, which are two of the main options. In the game, the best move is not played in the game. Instead, knight takes e4 is the best move, and after you take, you should now take back with the bishop and attack the queen. Let's say you block, and after takes take, even though white is still better, but here black is just in time to defend everything, keep everything together, and there might be some defending chances for black. But in the game, d takes e4 was instead played. Now this is a mistake, but you have to know why for white. Now, at first sight, you might just think that, oh, wait a second, bishop takes h6, and this is a discovered attack. I'm winning my opponent's queen. Well, you are winning your opponent's queen, but you just count the pieces, even though white is oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. White has 6 pawns, black has 5 pawns. Okay, white is up a pawn, but black is up a rook and a bishop for white's queen. And also, you should know that the pawn right now is attacking this knight, and if the knight moves, also there's e3, this discovered attack happening. The king is really, really weak right now. All kinds of ideas are coming. This position, black is actually winning. So sometimes, even though you should know that sometimes more major pieces like a rook and all kinds of minor pieces are sometimes stronger than a single queen. And here, d takes e4 was played. So why is d takes e4 a mistake? Well, in the game, Lagno will just show you why this is a mistake. Because white has this really nice move, g4. And bishop takes g4 is basically forced. But actually, there's another move which is slightly better than bishop takes g4, but it's really hard to spot. And it is knight d3. And of course, white takes on d3, because if you go king to b1, then you'll simply like win nothing for white. So you have to take on d3, and here after, let's say black takes and attack the queen, but now the queen comes out and defends the pawn just in time, and the pin, like the fork, is kind of unbreakable. And if you play b5 right now, well, the queen goes back, and now if you take, but already you see that these pawns are now floating, and you go knight e5. Threatening to take on g6, but also threatening to take on c6, and the position is falling apart for black. So in the game, instead, bishop takes g4 was played, but here we have, well, this is an inaccuracy, but white is actually winning after knight takes e4. But this is a move that is not that easy to see, because after bishop f3, you have to calculate knight c5, and if bishop takes 5, queen takes c5, well, queen takes c5 is not the best move here, but actually bishop takes h6, and if you take back, then after takes queen takes c5 with check, and this is game over basically. And also here, if black doesn't take on c5 and play something like king takes f7, well, now you just simply get out the rook and threaten queen g6. There are just too many threats towards black's king, and it's unstoppable. White is completely winning once again. But knight e4 is a move that needs a lot of calculation, and if black takes on e4, then you just take back, and after takes. Right now, material is even, but we have this really strong pawn on f7 being defended by our queen, and the king is too weak. Bishop h6 ideas are coming, bishop c3. These bishops will just come out and dominate this whole king side, and it's game over. But in the game, instead, Lagno decides to go for this more solid option, and she played knight e5. But this still will take a couple of more moves to decide the game. Bishop takes d1 was played in the game, and here knight g6. So you're not in a hurry to take this bishop, because why not take this pawn first, and it's with check. And of course, in the game, king g7 was played, because if you take on f7, then there's knight takes h8 with check. So in the game, king g7 was played, but here in the game, we have queen takes d1 now, and e3. This is a mistake. What black should have done is actually to go for this really quiet move, bishop g5, offering a trade of bishops, because now if you take on g5, black will take on g5 with check and win this knight, and it's game over for white, basically. And here, white needs to find this only move, knight takes h8, but now after takes, black will be happily able to trade off the queens, and the advantage is no longer that big enough for white to win. But in the game, however, Elisabeth, and also you should note that you cannot take on g6, because then after rook g1 check, let's say king takes f7, well, there's queen h5, and if you play bishop g5, but there's this pin, and now you go h4 to win the bishop. But this is actually very similar to in the actual game. First of all, we have e3 on the board, but simply white just takes the pawn, and after king g6, rook g1 was played, and after bishop g5, h4, what a beautiful move, and then a couple of more beautiful moves, queen c2 check, king goes back, another beautiful check on c4, queen goes into the board, attacks the c5 knight, also threatens to take the g5 pawn. Well, here a small inaccuracy. There's this only move to win immediately. All of the other moves lead to close to equalization at this point for white. The only move to win is to go rook d1. And the idea is simple. First of all, you gain control of this file and just question black. How will you move? Black is kind of like in a Suxman, because if you play something like rook a d8, well, now simply white just goes back and everything is falling apart. Queen goes back, you lose the knight. And there's just no way for black to get out of this. And let's say if black defends this b6 with b6 to defend the knight, but now there's e4 and bishop takes g5 is coming. e5 also, it's game over. Once again, it's impossible for black to stop all of these threats at once. But rook d1 is a quiet move, and sometimes when you're playing in a position like this where it just looks like you have so many play and everything, sometimes you don't have the patience to go for a quiet move. You just want to go straight in. And in the game, Lagno decides to go for e4, and right now, queen d4 was played in the game. Elisabeth found the best defending move, And here Lagno played rook f1. Right now, of course, black cannot take because you lose this knight on f6. And here, Elisabeth, with under time pressure, played knight cd7. But maybe it is still holdable if she had one of the rooks to f8 to defend the s6 knight, but still white is much better. But maybe black will have some slight chances. I mean, anything can happen right now because both sides don't have enough time. But I think black is the side who will make more mistakes because black is not only under time pressure, but also has a really bad position. But in the game, knight cd7 was played immediately, and now simply white just takes on g5 with the bishop, pins this f6 knight. Rook now defends, but it's too late because now after bishop e6, a really nice move, threatening to take one of the defending pieces of the f6 knight to win material, and after rook a d8 defending it, but you just take, and now e5 wins the f6 knight. Everything is just falling apart, bishop takes. Well, this might not even be the cleanest way. Rook d1 is even cleaner to win the game, but bishop f6 also wins. And after king c7, let's just see how Lagno finishes off in a beautiful way. And here she played e7, ignoring everything and pushes the pawn, rook e8 and bishop e5, but rook takes e7, and the final touch, rook d1. Because the d6 rook is hanging and everything is falling apart. White is winning material as well as the game. I mean, this is a really beautiful game. I mean, this is just beautiful, and Lagno played really well. Of course, this is not a perfect game because she did make some mistakes like e4, and also in the opening she missed the chance to take on a6 right away to win. But she played a lot of excellent moves, and she finished off this game really well. In my opinion, this is a really nice game. But of course, the game Alexandra Kucheniuk versus Han Dongyi is also a really nice game. But this game, in most people's eyes, is the game that is more spectacular in some way. And also, Lagno, she said that this is one of her best games in her whole career. But in the end, she didn't really win the award and anything. But I mean, do you guys think that this game can become should be the most beautiful game of this whole tournament, should win the award? You guys can actually leave comments down below to share your own opinions. But right now, hope you guys enjoyed this spectacular game and as well as this video. Thank you for watching, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!